Hello, this is Fred at the Gate with today's devotional. For all of you who have been struggling, been going through a difficult time, you feel like you're in your midnight hour, I want you to hang in there because the reality is you are closer than you think. Read Joshua, the first chapter, verses 1 through 11. And in this text, what has happened is Moses has died and the period of mourning is ending, and God comes to Joshua, who will succeed Moses as the new leader, and let him know, you're going to lead my people across. And he lets him know that he's going to be with him, not to be afraid, to be courageous. He gives him the information that he needs, and then Joshua sends his leaders throughout the camp, letting the people know, get ready, because in 3 days we're going to cross over into the promised land. So understand, you are closer than you think. You've experienced tragedy, and that's understandable, just like the tragedy that was occurring here. Here, the Israelites were in the wilderness, wandering for 40 years. But what had to happen is they had to get rid of this disobedient generation. So people had to die. And so for 40 years in the wandering, the folks that did not believe, that did not trust God, had to die out. That was the tragedy. The greater tragedy is because they didn't trust God to provide the victory for them. So 39 years earlier, they could have crossed over into the promised land after receiving God's 10 commandments. But because of their disbelief and their disobedience, they had to die out. That was tragedy. There's tragedy in your life. Once you get beyond the tragedy, understand, then there's a transformation. See, while they were in the wilderness, a new generation had to be born and prepared to trust God, to learn His word, and so that they could cross over. And so, my brothers and my sisters, understand, just as there's tragedy, there's a transformation. There are lessons learned from what tragic events occurred in our lives, learning how we can trust God, learning that God is faithful. Like He told Joshua, He would never leave him nor forsake him. He would be with him. And the same applies to us. So that transformation takes place. And I've learned that when you're in opposition to what God is doing, you will either become transformed or transferred. Either way, you're going to get out of the way. The other thing is there's a transition. Moses was the leader. Joshua is the new leader. There had to be a transition in leadership because God knows timing. He knows what's needed. Two different types of leaders, even though Joshua was Moses' aide for 40 years during that wilderness experience, but they're two different leaders and two different leadership styles. Where Moses was more diplomatic. Moses was a shepherd. He cared for the people. You know, he sat and listened to their complaints and helped them to resolve their issues. When they were thirsty, he got them water from a rock. Whereas Joshua will lead for 30 years conquering Canaan, this new promised land. So he was more of a warrior and a commander. When the people complained, he challenged them. When they needed water, he told them to dig their own wells. See, God knows what's needed when it's needed. So there will be a transition based on what the time is, what the assignment is, but there will always be triumph. Faith and obedience to God always leads to victory. They were able to cross over because even though they had been in their wilderness experience for 40 years, 3 days, 3 short days, they would cross over into God's promise. And so we need to understand that no matter how long we've been in our circumstances or situations, no matter how overwhelming or intimidating it may be, hang in there because you're closer than you think. And God can change your situation just like that.